The journey from awareness to acceptance is a long one, and everyone takes a different path in this journey. Today, we have Mary Barua, an Ashoka Fellow, the founder of the first autism charity in South Asia, Action for Autism, and my beloved mentor and barrier breaker. Mary, we have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
Today,
Hi.
As a parent. But before that, can you tell us a little bit about how you started your journey with autism?
Okay. I guess, if you talk about my journey with autism, I'd have to start with, I would start actually a little bit before Neeraj, my son, got a diagnosis, because I was interacting with somebody with autism, but I did not know what it was. And what I do recall from those times was largely confusion, because I could not quite understand why he did a lot of the things that he did. And for instance, one simple, it's so many years back, but I remember one being that whenever I helped him take a bath, and I'm talking about him 2 years, 3 years old, and I would try to shampoo his hair, and he would scream and cry, and I just could not understand, because I'd keep thinking, I'm doing it so gently. Why is he crying so much? And then he used to have, we call, he would start crying, and I could never understand why he was crying. I'd pick him up and carry him and walk around. It was, so I would say in some ways the journey started before he got a diagnosis at age 5. Right. And then, of course, I had a name to what he had. Nobody could tell me what that thing was. It was just a word which most people had never heard of. So, yeah, that's how my journey really started.
And what was your acceptance journey like once you got the diagnosis for Neeraj?
Okay, I think I must also add that clearly see that he was not like other children. He did not do a lot of the things that other kids did. In fact, he had a cousin who was just a week older than him. And she was chattering away about all kinds of stuff, and he wasn't saying a word. And he would get in the lift and he'd be looking down at his toes and not looking at the other children. He would play with the kids like the other kids would be playing on the landing. This is for a brief period we lived in an apartment block. And I thought that, okay, maybe he's a bit slow. And, that wasn't a big deal for me, because I believe that, we are all different. Some are smarter, some are, a little slow in some ways. And I was okay with that. When I got the diagnosis, I was very confused, because I had no way of getting any information. There were no books, there was no internet, there was no instant dialing to people outside. So it was like being in this, dark place, being given this word, but not being told what it was. Of course, I was told that it's a condition where there is communication, social, whatever, by this one doctor who spent 6 months in India and 6 months in Canada. And I'm talking about close to 40 years back, right? 36 years ago. So, it was, for me, it was frustrating. And I know this sounds weird, but honestly, it never occurred to me, why me? Because why not, why not me? I mean, that never occurred to me. And I wasn't angry at any point. I didn't rail at fate. Those things just never came to me. Because for me, okay, my son is slow. He's just got this strange thing that I've been told. And I was frustrated because I didn't know what it was. And that was, it was very confusing and frustrating. But I did not have all of those. Having said that, and I would say I was fairly accepting. I was quite accepting of his condition. But I did begin to lose that somewhere when he was he was in his, what should I say, when he was around 9, 10, because there were a lot of behaviors happening. and I did not know what it was all about and why it was happening. There was nobody who could help me. I realize now all the mistakes that were being made with him, whether it was at school or at home. Now I know all the mistakes that happened. But at that point, I did not know, right? So I wouldn't say that there was lack of acceptance, but yes, there was. I wasn't as accepting of him at that point. I used to get very bothered by what he was doing. But I have to say that I was never bothered by his having autism. I must put that straight on the table. I would go out with him, he'd be flapping and jumping. It never bothered me. Okay, that's what he wants to do, right? So those things never bothered me. What did bother me was some gross things that he developed, which were to do with toileting and stuff like that. And I was really frustrated, and I was losing my acceptance. And then I went for a training overseas, where one of the things they talked about was acceptance. And I thought, I was completely losing that with my son. And I'm very grateful. There are multiple things about the training. It was in many ways life-changing because it brought me back to the path of acceptance, which I was beginning to lose. And it also helped me because, when there are a lot of behaviors, it is very easy to become judgmental and stuff like that. So that really helped me, and that training that I went for. So when I came back, I had got back my acceptance and stuff like that. And I would say that time he was about when we did the training, I think he was 11 or 12 years old. And after that, yes, of course sometimes I lose my cool with him, as you would with any your child sometimes. But I think acceptance has not been really an issue with me because, the way I looked at it, and something that I keep telling families, what is it that I want for my child, right? I want him to be happy. That's my primary goal. I want him to be happy. Now, if I want him to be happy, I have to be the example, because I cannot be unhappy and expect him to be happy, right? And if I am unhappy with what he is, how am I ever going to help him to be a happy person? It cannot be, right?
I think here 2 points that you mentioned are very, very important for us to highlight once more, just like a revision. One is that acceptance is not a linear path, that you can go off that path. You can come back, go off, you can go back on that path, come again. So even if you, in the last episode, we spoke about grief and denial, how parents experience all of these. And over the lifetime of the child, when the child is dealing with different things, these emotions can reappear, right? And so the path is not a linear path. I think that is a very important thing that you said. And the second, you said is also something we spoke about in the last episode that put it in a much nicer way, I think. How am I as a parent going to be happy if I'm not happy with who my child is?
Yes.
And if my child is not seeing me happy, how on earth is my child going?
Absolutely. And this is a kind of a conundrum that parents face, because when you ask parents, and one of the things that has really helped is working with hundreds of families. It has helped me understand that there are different parents who deal with it differently, and that's okay. We all have a path to travel. There are parents who go through anger, parents who go through denial, and we have to be very understanding. Just like I have to be accepting of my son, I have to be accepting of this parent's family to help them to move towards acceptance, right? And one of the things that parents often get confused about is they say, I want my child to be happy. And then, we have to help them see that you're a loving parent, you want your child to be happy, but if you are not happy with your child, he can't be happy or she can't be happy. And love,
or they can't be happy.
And we think, because when we love anyone, not just our child, when we love a friend, when we love a sibling, when we love a parent, very often our love tends to be conditional. I love you, but I love, that is why parents often have favorites amongst their children also. So, I love you, but I would love you more if you were like this, or I'd love you more if you did really well in your exams. I'd love you more if you were, in India, fairer. I would love you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
in fact, I know parents who love the child who's fair more than the child who's dark. I mean, it sounds so crazy, but that's a fact. And our love,
and ridiculous, but it's a fact. Yeah,
it's a fact. And it's a reality that we have to accept, that our love is very conditional. Even with our spouse, even with our parents, it's very conditional. And I think if we can move to acceptance, only then can we love unconditionally. And when there is unconditional love, your child blossoms. Because the child senses that I am accepted completely for what I am. And it makes a world of difference. And it's something that I have lived. And believe me, my son is not what you would call the easiest of people, because he has a lot of mood challenges and stuff like that, right? And, because people often say, oh, it's very easy to say that when you have high functioning kids and stuff like that. Well, first of all, I don't believe in that label of high functioning, low functioning rubbish. But the point is that my son faces a lot of, but the reality is, at one time we did use those terms. That was when I did not understand autism as well, right? And I think one of the things that can really help in acceptance is when parents begin to truly and deeply understand their kids and understand autism. I cannot say that I understand autism completely even now, even though my son is 40. But the point is, I understand autism a lot more now than I did ever before, than I did yesterday and the day before that. And the more I understand his world, and I think the more it makes it easier for me to be unconditional in loving and accepting him.
Now I'm going to ask you a bit that what really was frustrating you was not your child's autism, but the lack of information about what to do and how to do. So can you talk acceptance enough?
In the beginning, I was frustrated because I knew that Neeraj was not learning the way other kids did. And I wanted to help him in that. And that was where the frustration came from. Because if I did not understand what it was, this thing that he had, how was I going to help him? Because I had tried teaching him, simple things like, communicating his needs. And he was not able to do that. So that is where my frustration came from. And as for your question of whether acceptance is enough, nothing is enough. Acceptance is not... I don't think that is really a valid question in some ways, because it's not about whether acceptance is enough.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, it is about acceptance being the springboard from which you do everything else. See, when you have acceptance, then you do not go around crazily trying to change your child into something he cannot be, right? Because I accept my child. I accept the fact that he has autism. I accept and I understand that he has difficulty, say, with transitions. I know transitions are really difficult for him. And I'm talking about my son, okay? And sometimes when he had, like the other day, he had a bit of a meltdown. And I said, my first thought is to stop and think, and this is what we tell our professionals who work with us as well. Stop and think, what is it that I have done? What is it that is there in the environment which is leading to this? I don't have to change him. I have to change what I have done. I have to change the environment. Then this meltdown would not happen. And sure enough, when you think from that perspective, you figure out, right? It takes time for people to understand that. So it's not about, people have told me, if you have acceptance, then you won't do anything. I said, what on earth are you talking about? Acceptance is what drives you to do the best for your child. But not to change him, but to provide him with whatever he needs to love and to learn and to flourish. That is what acceptance does.
I think you worded it perfectly by saying that it's like a springboard that catapults us. Is that even a word? No.
Yes.
Catapults us. Yes. Springboard springs us. Okay, my next question to you is, how can we aid acceptance in parents?
How can we?
Is there a way to it? Yeah. Is it, in my head, I am asking multiple questions here.
Right.
Is it ethical to even aid somebody's acceptance, or, because shouldn't we be just letting them be on their path? Shouldn't we just be letting them be? Shouldn't we just let them be on their path?
Right.
And second, and it also speaks about our own tolerance, right? So what if they're taking so much time to reach the acceptance phase? What if their journey is not linear? So what? I should be more tolerant.
Okay.
But then there's also the consequence of the child. Parent has not reached acceptance yet.
Right.
So I'm very confused about this.
Right. This is a very, very good question. And nobody's really asked me this before. But, the thing is that when there is a lack of acceptance, the individual with autism suffers, but they are not the only one who's suffering. The family suffers, right? And that is the thing. It's not just the child, it's the family who are also suffering. And I think it's not about letting the family be. See, when a family comes to us, like as an organization, families come to us all the time. And when they come to us, see, one of the things that happens is that, when you have a child, for most of us, there are very few people who don't have aspirations for their child. Of course, I do had aspirations in this sense. I don't know if I can call it aspiration, but for instance, since it was a boy child, so my husband instantly thought that he has to go to the school that boys in his family go to. So a lot of them go to Mayo College, right? So we had got the prospectus and everything when my son was a year old. So that he will go to a particular school, but some families have a lot more aspirations, deeper aspirations, something that I didn't really have, whatever he wants to be. But a lot of families do have that they'll be like their father, like their mother, like their grandmother. They must be this, but they must be a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist. So there are all, and they must come out first in class the way I came first in class. They must play game. So there are all these aspirations, which is very unfortunate. And this doesn't impact only autistic kids. This impacts typically developing children who live and suffer under shadow of aspirations. I know innumerable typical kids who are miserable because of the weight of their family's aspirations, right?
Yeah, like 3 Idiots movie, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's pretty common. It's not only to do with, having a condition. So the thing is that when a parent comes to us, it's really like they've got a jolt and their aspirations are kind of, falling apart. What they need then is really, the way I see it and the way we see it is that what they really need then is hope, right? They hope that this is not the end of the world. That's not the time to talk about acceptance. Acceptance will grow and it will grow from what we are telling the family. As you know, if the families keep coming to us regularly, it helps a lot more because we can help them with this. But if they come for a few times and then they go off, then they pick up, negative beliefs from other places, right? Not necessarily, not everybody does, but some do. So when they come to us, what we give them is hope. And the first thing a lot of families would ask, they ask us, "Shadi karega?" They ask us, "Naukri karega?" They ask us, "Kya karega?" Will they? What will my child do in life? And we always, is my child severe? Is he mild? And we always say, we don't know. We don't have an answer. Every child is an individual, right? But what we can tell you is that there is no child who cannot learn and grow.
Yeah.
And that is what we can tell you. Your child will learn, your child will develop, right? We can't say how much he will learn, but he or she will learn. He or she will grow and flourish. So what you want to do is try and understand your child, and we'll help you with that. We'll help you on that journey. Try and understand your child. Try and provide the support she will need to learn. And that is what is going to help him. And I think that is what we need to tell families. Because what happens to a lot of families is that when they get a diagnosis, some of them get really wonderful pediatricians who give the diagnosis, right?
Yeah, but that's very few.
Tiny minority. Yeah. Most of them go to a doctor who tells them, your child has autism, he's not going to learn anything much. Or will tell them, oh, he's very normal. Ye kuch saal baad theek ho jayega. Yeah. So they come with all these weird, in either nothing is going to happen or he's going to be fine, so don't bother.
Yeah, he doesn't need any help.
He doesn't need any help. ये बहुत माइल्ड है, ज्यादा कुछ नहीं होगा, बड़ा होगा ठीक हो जाएगा.
बदतमीज है, 2-4 लगाने से ठीक हो जाएगा.
हाँ, ये भी. Actually, I have been told that about my son. That what you need. Why I was told that by the leading pediatrician in the city I was living in. Somebody who was very socially well known, lovely person otherwise. But he was, when I had taken Neeraj to see him, and Neeraj was running around in the waiting room like a charged particle. He could never sit still, right? He was about 3 at the time. So while he was running around, he banged on the door of the doctor's chamber. So eventually when he went in, he checked Neeraj, he tried to knock on his knee with the hammer, blah, blah, and all of that. And then he told me, you know what your son needs? He needs a beating. So I said, doctor, I actually have hit him a few times and I used to feel terrible about it when I would do it.
Yeah.
And he said, obviously you don't hit him hard enough. I never went back to him again. I just walked out and said, I'm not going to go to this doctor again. Of course, I used to lose my cool with my son because he took, like, half my belongings would be lying outside, disappeared through the window. So I would lose my cool because I didn't know what to do. But when I did hit him when he was young, I would feel terrible about what I had done. And then to have the doctor tell me, do it more, because, my parents would get very upset. They would say, we have never raised a finger on you. We've never been hit, me and my brother. My parents never hit us. So, and they would get shocked that I hit him sometimes. They said, how can you hit a child? How can you hit him? And then when the doctor said this, my mother said, never go back to him. I said, of course, no, I'm not going back.
Okay, so one last question that I have. What's your advice to therapists? Because as an autistic person, I see that even therapists lack acceptance. Like you said, that doctor lacked the acceptance of autismhood. What's your advice? Also, as therapists expect parents to follow their guidelines.
Yeah.
But many a times parents don't follow these guidelines.
Right.
And so there's again a conflict between therapist is telling this, but the parent is not doing it.
Right.
And how do we resolve that conflict, especially in the context of acceptance of their child?
Right. Okay, so I would say that, first of all, sometimes therapists do, when they tell parents to do something, they tell them to do something. It is critical for them to help the parent understand why they have to do what they are being told to do. Because, this is something at AFA, at Action for Autism, we keep telling parents, understand why you're doing this. Don't just do it because I'm telling you or somebody else is telling you. Ask. And that is one of the problems. And sometimes, and I'm sorry to say this, sometimes the therapists do not explain to the parents why they have to do it because they themselves don't know why they are doing it. They are just doing it because they've read it somewhere, or somebody's told them, or they've heard it at a workshop. But they haven't understood the why. So when you're telling the parent to do something, you have to tell them why. Then it becomes meaningful, right? Secondly, you have to do whatever you're telling the parent to do, you have to do it and show them. Don't do it behind closed doors. Very often, parents do not get to see what you're doing. And oftentimes, the therapist himself or herself doesn't know how to do it. They are doing it.
I don't understand this. Why are parents not allowed in therapy rooms?
No, they have to be allowed. How can you tell them to do something when you haven't shown them what you are doing? It cannot be. It's different if the parent says, I cannot come, I don't have the time. Then it's different, right? If there is a parent who needs to earn a living and can't come, etc. But otherwise, you cannot block the parent from watching what you're doing and then expect them to do it. How will they know what you want them to do? That's the other thing. And there was one thing, therapists have to understand one thing. Supposing they have let the parent watch what they are doing, supposing they have explained to the parent, this is why you do it. Even after that, the parent may not follow through. And we've experienced it. It happens. We just tell ourselves, you have to remind yourself, as a therapist, I'm spending max 1 hour with that child. And I'm doing it out of a choice. Here is a parent who spends the rest of the 23 hours with the child, and this was not a choice. And I think therapists have to keep that in mind. You chose
and they don't have respite.
You chose your profession. You're doing it because you love it. At least I hope you're doing it because you love this job. Right? The parent is learning to love this child because he had or she had expected another child.
Yeah.
Right? And now has this child instead and is learning to love this child. And it can be hard for a lot of parents because the other thing therapists have to remember is parents do not live in a vacuum. They live in these joint families, in these apartment blocks, in these communities where there are critical eyes and tongues that are constantly telling them they're terrible. I remember being told that I was a terrible mother, repeatedly over and over and over again. Right? So when you're dealing with that, not every parent can be, like I used to say to help with you, I'd say, oh, but my son has autism, because I saw that as an opportunity to create awareness. But not everybody can do that, and we have to accept it. And there are lots of parents, particularly mothers, who are, and this is a reality, in abusive relationships because they have a child who has a disability. They are in an extremely abusive relationship. There is nowhere they can walk out, and they are not going to talk about it to the therapist. So therapists have to be you're not dealing with a child in a vacuum. You are dealing with a child that is surrounded by an entire community, which is often very judgmental. And you won't believe how many of these mothers have to go home, not only work with the child, they have to cook for their husband, press the mother-in-law's feet, jump up when the husband comes home and serve dinner no matter what time at night, have the house looking spick and span, keep that child out of the way of all other family members. How do you expect that parent usually the mother, to be able to do what you ask them to do. So we have to be accepting of families as well. Just as we want to teach acceptance to our families, we have to be accepting of the families who come to us.
And what advice do you have to mental health professionals? Because our personal opinion has been that autistic people need a lot of mental health counseling. Yeah. So do their parents, but what is the role of the mental health professional?
There, of course, again, I have to start by saying there are some mental health professionals who are absolutely brilliant, right? And I know some of them and who are really, really amazing. But there are a lot more who, the reality, Rakshita, is that the understanding of autism amongst mental health professionals and any kind of, professional, medical professionals, etc., is extremely limited. Extremely limited. Most of them do not understand autism. So what happens with a lot of mental health professionals is that they oftentimes come to a diagnosis of, what should I say? Either they feel that they're just acting out or they have some kind of a mental health disorder, which they don't. What the autistic person really needs very often is a more predictable environment, an environment where the other people actually need to be more accepting of the person, because a lot of the challenges that people with autism face are because of the environment. And that is something mental health professionals often don't understand. I'm not saying that many of them do not have things like, anxiety disorder or bipolar and other stuff, but
they might.
But far too many of them are unnecessarily and incorrectly seen as having comorbid situations, which actually they don't. That has been our experience. And if the mental health professional is somebody who's really well informed about autism, and there are some amazing ones, but they're really very few and far between. So, what really is needed is a lot more awareness and understanding, not just awareness, understanding of what the autism experience is all about. That is really missing. There is a lot more awareness, but the understanding is still not there.
That's it. Thank you so much for agreeing to come. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the podcast. Actually, I should be frank with you. I did not have a lot of insight into the parent world.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
It's two different worlds, really.
Yeah.
One has to look at it that way. It's two different worlds. And we have to learn how to bridge that gap. We use the term that, as therapists, we have to be cross-cultural interpreters. We say that we have to be cross-cultural interpreters because we live in the neurotypical world, so we understand what it is, and we have to be cross-cultural interpreters and help autistic people understand our world as we try and understand theirs.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rakshita.